This is the story of how a small island nation was able to transform itself from relative isolation and a poor plantation-based system to fame and fortune just by slapping a sticker on bottled water. Of course, I'm talking about Fiji and Earth's finest water, Fiji Water. There really is only one way to experience the beauty of these islands. You know what I'm talking about. So I took a flight to Fiji. Oh, that's awkward. I guess I can experience the magic of Fiji through this water bottle instead. Fiji Water was originally made by a Canadian businessman in 1996 but later bought out by a California company in 2004. The guy who made Fiji Water had also made the Southern Pacific Hotel in Fiji in the 1960s, so I guess he saw some potential in these islands. And I guess the Americans saw the potential too. Fiji Water is ranked as the favorite bottled water in the USA among all age groups except for baby boomers. Now apparently this water comes from an artisan underground aquifer on the Fijian island of Viti Levu and is slowly filtered by volcanic rock to give it a soft, smooth taste. Their words, not mine. I don't know how much I believe that this water has some sort of naturally sweet flavor superior to tap water somehow, but after trying my first sip of Fiji water ever, I can say it tastes exactly like water. It doesn't matter if I think it's crazy though, because around 70% of Americans prefer bottled water to tap water, and as the fan favorite in the country, Fiji Water has a clear advantage in the world's largest consumer market. Suck on that, Avion. In reality, Fiji Water does not have a clear advantage over other water brands in terms of taste. They are just simply better at advertising. They sold the nation of Fiji as a luxury brand. The packaging invokes tropical images that just make me want to guzzle down water, and they're not shy to celebrity endorsements. It's the water that rich people drink. You can love it or hate it, but you have to admit it is wildly successful. Some people accuse Fiji Water of not being very environmentally friendly, which is true. It sells bottled water after all, profiting from military coups and not paying a dime in taxes. Others just enjoy the sweet taste of Fiji and love a simple swig of water. Whatever it is that made Fiji Water blow up in the US doesn't really matter. What does is the fact that it has made water Fiji's largest export, nearly all of it through Fiji Water. That's right, water as their largest export from a country in the middle of nowhere. Goes against all conventional economics. Water is generally very heavy to move and quite expensive to export. Most countries export water by actually exporting food so the other country saves on the water that would be used to grow that food, but not Fiji. The water export grew from around $150 million in 2009 to $260 million in 2021, and it makes up nearly a quarter of all their exports. Just goes to show how far some people will go for anything considered luxury. Almost all of it, around 92% of the water, goes to the USA, and almost 30% of imported water in the US comes from Fiji, beating out Italy, which makes Fiji Water the most imported water brand in the country. But despite being a small, mostly import-based country, their exports are remarkably complex. That's because this water is a fairly new phenomenon. They had to build an economy before Fiji Water. Yet when you look at their economy now, it's not built from this 75%. In fact, their biggest export by far isn't even on this list. It's tourism. Tourism in Fiji has grown massively since the 80s and 90s. I mean, just look at these beaches with water so blue you wouldn't be able to find the Blue Man Group in it. Sand so smooth you can put it in a smoothie. Weather so nice you ain't ever gonna leave. And jungle so green you'll be wondering if you can even see other colors. By 2017, tourism was a $2 billion industry, twice as much as all the goods they export in 2021, making up around 40% of their GDP and over 100,000 jobs. Could Fiji Water have legitimately sold the idea of a luxurious Fiji to the world and sparked them as a new tourist hotspot? Maybe. But most of their tourists, especially nowadays after the pandemic, are Australians, mostly from its proximity. The water is popular there, sure, but not as big as in the US. Then it's New Zealander tourists, probably from proximity again, and then American tourists. But European tourists who, okay, are a little further than the Americans, but are roughly the same wealthiness as them, travel to Fiji almost 5 times less than their Yankee counterparts. And China is no stranger to sending millions of tourists abroad. They are by far the largest tourist generator in the world. Why aren't they lounging on Fiji's beaches? A nice explanation is simply that Fiji doesn't sell as much Fiji water to Europe and China as they do to North America and Australia. but is that really true? Their tourism revenue graph didn't really pick up until the 2000s when Fiji Water hit international markets, and their per capita income kinda at the same time, but this is much less convincing. So it really begs the question, a chicken and egg sort of question. Did Fiji Water spark Fiji's tourism industry, or did Fiji's tourism industry create Fiji Water's international success? I don't really have an answer, probably both. What I can tell you is it might have improved the lives of Fijians, but to answer how, we need some quick context. How is Fiji set up, and how did the average Fijian live throughout history? I'm sure you know that Fiji is a group of islands way out here in the Pacific. It's made of mainly Viti Levu in the south and Vanuatu in the north. It was originally settled by Melanesians 3,500 years ago who lived in small, mainly coastal communities, doing some subsistence agriculture and slash and burn farming. Was it a peaceful little utopia where everyone lived in harmony with nature and everyone took and made only what they needed? No, obviously not. Nowhere on Earth was like that. Hierarchical clans, often centralized by a chief, fought over territory to form confederations and pay blood debts. These chiefs were usually based on merit, not bloodline, and societal heavy lifting was put on the family unit, so they definitely were not absolute rulers. It more or less stayed like that until skip a few thousand years and they made contact with European sailors. The British, having heard a rumor of mysterious cannibals in these islands, were pretty slow to interact with the islands in the early 1800s. They're only really here to trade and spread the word of Jesus. What did they want? Sandalwood. Why? I guess it smells good, and it was an exotic luxury, anything for that social status. What did many chiefs get in exchange for heavily taxing their people to produce that sandalwood? Duh, the only thing of value these sailors had, guns. There's a super common theme in history that whenever European sailors made contact with a hierarchical society, they would trade guns for exotic goods, or slaves, and that hierarchical society would get even more despotic, almost tyrannical, and some chief or ruling elite would subjugate and extract from everyone else, structuring the whole system around collecting that good, and they were the ones in charge because, they owned the guns. This happened in Fiji under Ratu Tanoa and his son Kakobau. Long story short, Kakobau got into a ton of debt, and instead of taking out even more loans like the rest of us, he sold a big chunk of Viti Levu to the Polynesia Company in 1868. He eventually ceded the whole land to the UK, and Fiji was a British colony in 1874. The Polynesia Company set up many plantations for Fijians to labor at, but the new British rulers said, whoa, have a heart. This is Fijian land. We shouldn't make the Fijians serfs on their own territory. We can do so much better. Let's just import Indian slaves. Yeah, I was just about to say that. Indentured Fijian labor was banned, and Fijian land was not allowed to be sold to non-Fijians under British rule. Even that magical Fiji Water aquifer we saw, that's on a 99-year lease. The Fiji Water Company does not technically own that land. Indians were brought in to work mainly in agriculture, especially in sugar. Sugar was Fiji's cash crop before they realized they could sell water to hipsters, making up over 50% of their exports for most of its history, particularly selling it to Europe through the government-owned Fiji Sugar Corporation. It worked to keep native Fijians, also called Itauke, on top of the Indo-Fijians. Even today, they make up the bulk of the low-paying jobs and agricultural sector in Fiji, even some parts having separate communities to live in. When it was time for independence in 1970, the population was split rather 50-50. Fijian politics was dominated by the Itauke, yet from a growing Indian population, the 1987 election was won by an Indian-dominated coalition. That didn't bow well with Itauke politicians. 4 coups. Fiji has had 4 coups since 1987. 2 actually in 1987 after Itauke protested and members of the ruling party were arrested. They went to military rule, then slight democracy in the 90s, and an Indian prime minister won in 2000s. So another coup in 2000 under a Fijian nationalist government, and then another coup in 2006 mainly over the government threatening to sell coastal land to private companies and being accused of corruption. During this time, the economy stagnated as confidence deteriorated, infrastructure broke down, and the crime rate jumped all over. But surprisingly, this military rule was less corrupt, more efficient, abandoned racist policies, and even encouraged fled Indians to come back. They also instituted democracy again in 2014, and every election since has been won by the Fiji First Party. So you really wonder which group is in power, huh? By now, the Indo-Fijian population had shrunk to less than 40% of the population, mainly due to emigrants fleeing the country or working international jobs for a better standard of living. I mean, 20% of Fijians do not even live on the island, most of these being Indo-Fijians. It's even estimated that 10% of their national income is made up of remittances or money sent back home from overseas workers. So when you add up people coming to see their country plus money sent home from overseas, it adds up to half of what they produce. Fiji is made on openness to the world. Openness possibly created by shipping Fiji water to the USA. Well, it's a bit of a stretch to say that, considering for most of history they were a rather racial, sugar-based economy, only recently opening up to tourism. But this water plus tourism combo did help them slightly break out of these prejudicial, poverty-making institutions by creating better economic times, even if it's a little sensationalized. Now watch me try the Fiji Chug Challenge.